Alright, in the last video we basically went in and checked to see how many dice we were rolling with. And then we gave results based on that number. So if you remember, we basically prompt the user to see how many dice they want to play with, and we force them to give us a 1 or a 2. Then we take that number and we store it in the variable num underscore dice. Then in our game loop, we roll die 1 because that is always going to get done. Then we check to see if the number of dice is equal to 2, and if it is, we roll die 2, and we print out you rolled a value of die 1 and a value of die 2. Else, if num dice is not equal to 2, we just print out you rolled a and the value of die 1. Alright, so it's pretty simple. I did some examples in the last video. So if you missed it for whatever reason, go back and watch the last video. Alright, so we're moving on, and at the end of the last video I said we need to now check to see if any of the dice rolled a 1. Because if you remember from the instructions, if we roll a single 1, whether it's 1 dice or 2 dice, we lose our turn and any accumulated points during that turn. If we roll snake eyes or 2 ones when we have 2 dice, then we lose our turn and we lose all our points, which means we have to go into our scores array and erase the points for whatever position we're at here, or J. Alright, so let me pop in a couple of condition statements. Alright, so as you can see, there's my if-else statement for the dice, and then right below that, I've got an if-else-if statement. And the reason I'm using an else-if is because we have to check 2 conditions. The first one is die 1 equal to 1, and remember 2 ampersands are and, die 2 equal to 1. And if it is, we're going to print out snake eyes / turn over. And then we're going to break out of the loop, the current loop, which is the game loop, and that puts us back in the player loop, and then we're going to go to the next player. Else if, so if that condition is not met, we're going to check to see if die 1 is equal to 1 or die 2 is equal to 1. And if it is, we're going to say you rolled a 1 / turn over, and then break out of the current loop and go to the next player. Alright, now you may be asking, well, what's the difference between and or? And this is very important because when you get into more complex conditions and things that you have to check for, you got to make sure that you don't type in something that's going to prevent you from getting to another condition. And if I would have reversed these and put the or up here, what would have happened was if die 1 is equal to 1 or die 2 is equal to 1, well, with snake eyes, that condition is met because one or the other, even though they're both ones, one or the other is a 1. So it would have never got down to the and. So we check the and first, and if they're both 1, we do whatever's here. If they're not both 1, then we come down here and check to see if either or are 1s. Alright, and hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, take some time with this because it's really important in programming. A computer's only as smart as what you type in. Alright, so one of the other things that I said we needed to do was in our snake eyes, or this first condition, we need to set whatever the score is for index J, or the current player, back to 0. So this will be the first time that we've used set. So let me go ahead and type that in. All right, so it's as simple as this. You call whatever the array list is, and this particular one, it's scores, dot set, and then in parentheses you have two arguments. Your first one is the index or position that the value's in that you want to change. And in this case, remember, when we go into this loop, J is the current player and their score is in the same position or index in the scores array list. So that's why we're calling J here. And then I'm just setting it to 0, so I just typed in a 0. All right. So the next thing we need to do, because basically if we hit a 1, we're going to break out of the loop, go to the next player. So the next thing we want to do is if we don't hit a 1, where do we go from there? Well, we want to go back and prompt the user to see if they want to roll or hold. So you can do that the same way you did right up here in this do while loop. And you can pretty much just grab that, copy it down there. The only thing you're going to do is change this to, would you like to roll or hold? This will be the same. And you will add and C is not equal to lowercase h and C is not equal to uppercase h. So it'll look something like this here. Alright, so here's my do while loop. I changed this to ask them, would you like to roll or hold? Of course, putting parentheses around the R and the H. I use that same exact thing. We're just going to use C again because I don't need it up here until the next player's turn. And then while, and you can see I just added and C is not equal to lowercase h and C is not equal to uppercase h. So as long as this condition isn't being met, we're just going to keep going through and asking them, would you like to roll or hold? Now, one of the things that we need to do immediately after this, because you remember when we hit the R up here, we just jump right into our loop. It lets us out and we go to the next line in our code. So we need to check down here to see if we hit an H. Because if we hit an H, remember, we're going to break out of the loop and go to the next player. We're also going to take our current score and put that in the scores array at whatever J is, or the index J. All right, so let me go ahead and run a condition statement. All right, so if C is equal to lowercase h or C is equal to uppercase h, we're going to go into scores. We're going to set position J, just kind of like we did up here. And the value is going to be K plus die 1 plus die 2. And remember, if we're only playing with one die, die 2 will always be 0. So we don't have to worry about that. And we'll go in and I'll run a couple of examples here in a few. But for now, remember, first of all, K hasn't been updated in our loop. So up here, remember when we get to the bottom of the loop, we got K plus equals die 1 plus die 2. Well, down here, K is still whatever we came into this loop with. So we need to add die 1 and die 2 to it because we've already rolled in this loop prior to hitting this where we ask them whether they want to roll or hold. All right, hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to print out a little something down here so that we can actually see this working. Alright, so I put in a little print line down here, and basically I get their name for the current player, and then I say your total score is, and then I go into scores.getJ. And you may be wondering, why can't we just call score? Because if you remember up here, we initialized a score variable with scores.getJ. But when we did that, let's just say the first pass, so because we haven't got the loop going yet. So when we did that, we initialized this to 0. So this is still 0. This hasn't been updated yet. So we either need to say score equals scores.getJ down here, and then type in scores, which to me is a little bit wasteful because it's too many characters. So I just went ahead and put scores.getJ since we updated it right here. Alright, so let me go ahead and run this, see what we got. So we're going to play with 2 dice on the first one. 2 players. We'll do Selena and Jensen. Alright, so Selena, it's your turn. Of course, you have a score of 0 because we just started the game. And I'm going to roll. And I get a 5 and a 5. I'm going to roll again. Alright, I'm going to roll one more time. Oh, I was feeling lucky. Alright, 2 and a 1. Of course, it kicked me out. Goes to Jensen. I'm going to roll. 6 and a 2. 4 and a 5. And a 2 and a 4. Alright. So I'm going to hold on this one, but let's figure out what we got, because it should print out what we got here. Because once I hit the H, it's going to set scores, and it's going to basically take K, which is 0. Oh, well, it was 0. And we're going to walk through this so you can see exactly how it works. So when we came into it, it was 0. And then I rolled a 6 and a 2, which is 8. So now K is 8, and then I rolled a 4 and a 5, which is 9, and added that to K, right? So 9 plus K, if you remember in my update up here, at the top of my loop, all right, so 9 plus 8 is 17, and then I rolled a 2 and a 4 on this one, so we got 17 is K, plus 2, 19, plus 4, 23. So I should have a value of 23 in my scores array. So let me go ahead and hit the hold. And there you go. Jensen, your score is 23. Alright, so let me go ahead and run this again. We'll play it with 1 dice. So 1 dice, 2 players. And we'll do Joseph and Renee. Alright, so Joseph is at 0. So he rolls. Rolls a 5, rolls a 2, and rolls a 5. And I'm going to hold. Now, on this one, before I hold, keep in mind, die 1 and die 2 was set to 0, but we're going to roll die 1 in this one. So we come into the loop, we roll die 1, we get a 5. So this condition is never met. And so we come down here and we print out, you rolled a 5, and then you rolled a 2, you rolled a 5. So die 2 remains 0. So we come down here, once again, basically going through our loop. On the first pass is 5. We come up here. Now K equals 5 plus 0, or 5. And then on the second pass, 5, because that's what k is now, equals 2 plus 0, which is 7. And then when we go down here to print it out or to actually set our scores, now it's 7 plus 5, or 12, plus 0. So we should have 12 when I hit the hold. All right, so Joseph, your total is 12, and now Renee, it's your roll. So we roll. Oh, she hits a 1 right away, so she's out of the game. So anyways, that's kind of how it works. Hopefully it makes sense to you. If not, like I say, just look over the code, try to figure out what it's doing, and make your own comments, what you think it's doing at each point. And when we come back in the next video, we'll actually go in and we'll force this thing to loop so we can get to our 100 points. So we'll go through the players more than once. All right, so thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.